All right, welcome back to another Explore Equatio Monday. So it is April 27th. Again, my name is Louis, joining you from Central Florida, and that is Ryan, my co-host there, joining from the UK. So
Hi, everyone.
we have a pretty action-packed show, I guess, if you will. We're going to try and keep this more theme-minded and think to ourselves, is there things that we haven't shown? If our questions are kind of tailoring off, are there things that maybe you didn't know that Equatio can do? And I think it's fair to say, and hopefully we'll show you some of those things today. Also, I hadn't had a chance to kind of connect with Ryan. Ryan, I got some really good feedback from a user that watched an episode in previous weeks. And she actually called me Dr. Shanafelt. So I'm going to need you to refer to me as Dr. Shanafelt from now on.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. And she actually said that, who needs Tiger King on Netflix when we have Digital Math Mondays? And that she was actually thinking of postponing. Right. That's right. So she was actually thinking of postponing her retirement. As crazy as that sounds, she's so excited about math and Equatio and talked about her husband. So she's a fan of the show, and I thought she's worth mentioning. So shout out to her. She sent some really positive email and some feedback. So real good stuff here. So what we're going to try and do and showcase today for you all is some time-saving features that you may or may not know about in terms of Equatio. And the first one that I'm going to go over with you, and I have my screen shared here, and you should see a Google Doc. And I'm going to go ahead and close Equatio. Usually it's like an automatic for me where I just constantly go right up to the Chrome extension and load that. But the first question here that we kind of thought we could cover with you is, did you know that there's a keyboard shortcut to open the program? So in fact, when the Equatio launched, we were really big in showing some of those keyboard shortcuts and implementing tons of keyboard shortcuts into our program. So the keyboard shortcut that I'm going to show with you or share with you today is if you have a Google Doc open and you want to load Equatio, you can simply press Alt-Shift-Q. So let's try that here, Alt-Shift-Q. So Shift, Alt-Q, not necessarily in any order, just kind of press all three down. And obviously it's hard for you to see me physically do that, but Alt-Shift-Q will give you a really quick shortcut to opening Equatio. So let's try that one more time. So in succession here, Shift, Alt-Q, and it just opens really, actually, it seems like it loads actually super fast compared to like the Chrome extension. So when you go up here and click, sometimes it takes like an extra second. The keyboard shortcut is actually super fast there. So hopefully you guys, might be able to take advantage of that keyboard shortcut. Share it out with students if you'd like. But that's just a quick time-saving feature tool that I wanted to share with you all today. Question number 2.
So just maybe while you're on that, I think it's really important to highlight the usefulness of these keyboard shortcuts for accessibility, obviously.
Yeah.
And for users who aren't quite good at moving the mouse around, maybe they have some issues with the mouse movement or tracking the mouse movement.
Right.
It's really helpful for them to have like that quick keyboard shortcut. And the other thing to know about that Alt-Shift-Q is that you can actually toggle it. If you press it once, it shows Equatio. If you press it again while Equatio is open, it puts you back into the Google Doc. So you can continue typing in the Google Doc as well.
Right. So that helps with like the visually impaired and the accessibility piece. And Ryan, Ryan and I have, collaborated on some of these. Prior to me joining, a lot of these have just been implemented and integrated into the program. And there are several shortcuts out there, but this is just kind of a really nice one here. So he said Alt-Shift-Q will take me and open the program. And then when I hit Alt-Shift-Q the one more time, it'll actually put my cursor back into the Google Doc. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yeah, exactly. So, and for anybody who's wondering why Alt-Shift-Q, there's a very logical explanation, is that that was the very first combination of keys that we could get that worked on Chromebooks, Windows, Mac, for example, and one that actually had a letter from the word Equatio in it as well. So,
that's cool. Hey, I didn't know that either. Yeah. So, hey, it's not a good day for me if I'm not learning too. So that's always interesting. I always like doing these with Ryan because I always learn something too in these. So that's awesome. Let's jump to tip number 2 here. And I'm anxious to see this. You know, it's kind of like, you know, my 7-year-old son just started to learn to ride his bike, and you know, there's practice obviously that goes into this, and some of that can be said with ed tech tools, including Equatio. So, you know, I've never been like a I'm a perfectionist. I shouldn't say that, but I've never been a very perfect person when it comes to using this handwriting eraser. So I'm going to throw this one over to Ryan. So, did you know that you can actually use, you know, your mouse, or if you're using a touch screen, to actually erase handwritten math that's on the screen? So we'll throw this over to Ryan. Take a look at his device. Go ahead, Ryan.
Sure. So I should point out, you did say touchscreen and mouse. It is a lot. I think it's a lot more difficult to do this with a mouse than it is a touchscreen.
Yeah.
So if you've got a touchscreen laptop, or if you're using an iPad with the new Mathspace updates, it's going to be a lot more natural for you to scribble out with your finger than it is your mouse. But I'm going to try it with my mouse today, and we'll see how it goes. So in the handwriting pane, if you're typing an equation, so we've got x equals 33, and I typed 35 by mistake. What I actually do is scribble over the top of the 5 with my mouse. There we go.
Ooh.
And scribble on the top one as well. And that then, it just erases out the last thing that I did. And I can keep going back as well. So I can scribble on the 3, scribble on the equals. Sorry, my internet connection is a bit slow here as well. And then scribble on the X.
Oh, I'm getting a kick out of watching you do that. And, you know, now that I watch you do that, seriously, Ryan, it's like, I feel like where my handwriting and my eraser functions have not worked well in the past is I see how quickly you're doing it. And I think maybe I think there's something to that. So like, I think it's going to take practice for users, but watching you do that makes me think, well, maybe I just never move my mouse quick enough. So that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a lot easier to do with your hand when you have that sort of action to it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But you know, if you don't want to erase it with your mouse, or you've only got a mouse to work with, and you find that awkward, you know, you can still use the right hand side at the end of the day to go and delete the characters back into your math again if you have made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then continue then drawing with the handwriting tool then afterwards.
Right. Oh, that's really good. Now I can practice that and be a little bit better at that myself. So like I said, if I'm not learning here, it's not been a good day for me either. So that's cool. I appreciate you showing that. Tip 3, let's jump into this. Talks about Mathspace integration just in general with the G Suite. So I think where we need to kind of touch on this is typically in the past, on my screen here, you know, I've shown my Mathspace in the past. So I've always told users, you know, this is a really good place for you to bring like your instructional design skills, you know, to the table and design these unique thumbnails and Mathspaces for users. You have this, you know, dedicated dashboard here, and you go to equatio.texthelp.com. Now, this is a great place for you to, you know, utilize our Mathspace and have kids interact with the math. But this particular tooltip talks about like integrating these Mathspaces right within the G Suite. So if you open any of the Google products, such as Docs, Shapes, Sheets, Slides, Drawings, you know, that kind of dark horse of Google, you know, Ryan and I mentioned before, really cool button here in our G Suite integration is this inserting of Mathspaces, where students can insert something that they've created. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this open. Notice that at the very top, it actually opened up another Chrome tab here. So this is really, you know, unique within our product, that you're not really building inside of this dock anymore. You're building inside of this alternate tab. So this tab will open. And then I want to pay close attention here. If you look up here in the top left corner, I think this is kind of unique because it's telling you, you know, hey, Louis, whatever you create in this open space here is going to redirect and go back into this document. So it's important to note when you look here to make sure that whatever you're creating here is pointing back to the document. And of course, it's going to point back to the document that originally got you here, which is originally I was in this Google Doc and I clicked on that link. So I can go here and start and interact with my shapes here. You know, I can drop, if I'm working with elementary students, I can drop some tangrams in here and pull these items apart and start to separate and have primary students work with the different shapes. one thing I think that was kind of, pretty neat in our last update in Mathspace, we haven't touched on this either, Ryan, it's probably a good place to hit this, is, one of our developers added in this transformation piece inside our menu here. So you can select an object and you can rotate it or flip it vertically and rotate. So that's something that we haven't really showcased a whole lot here. So that's kind of unique here. Select another shape and you can move and manipulate that. So I can also go in here and drop in other different types of shapes and activities for students. So here's your pentominoes. And of course, I can pull these apart, separate these. This allows you, of course, once you separate these, to obviously select these. And as soon as I select one, notice the menu pops up, and that allows you that interaction piece to work with. I can drop a shape in here. Let's just drop a protractor in real quick. And then notice I've kind of filled up what I want to do here in my Mathspace. And I can't tell you how many times I've made this mistake. Hopefully you're like me here, so I'm not alone in this. I'm so used to going and inserting math here. I don't know if Ryan knows where I'm going to go with this, but like when I go to insert my Mathspace, I'm so used to clicking insert math. And when you actually go to insert the Mathspace into the doc, I've always made the mistake and clicked on the wrong insert button. So hopefully you're like me. If you're not, I hope that's a good thing too. But I always click here on insert. And when you click on insert here, watch as it redirects that Mathspace back to that Google Doc. So a really neat way, we've had a lot of feedback in the past about users collaborating within one Mathspace. And this really is the best way to provide a collaboration piece inside of Mathspace, is to use obviously a shared Google Doc. So I could turn and share this document to Ryan. Ryan then could go in and put his Mathspace in directly underneath mine. So that's kind of a unique piece within the G Suite part of Equatio, is to be able to insert these interactive Mathspaces within the product. So anything to add there, Ryan?
I think the only thing I would add is for those manipulations you've seen there, for rotating shapes and flipping shapes.
Yeah.
If you hover over any one of those rotations, it will actually show you the keyboard shortcut for that as well.
Yeah. So yeah, let me go back to that here. Let me see if I can just pull that back in. So notice when I clicked and selected that Mathspace. So since we are talking about some accessible points here in these keyboard shortcuts, if I hover over it,
yeah, hover over the transform and arrangement.
So right here, yep. So notice right here, what Ryan was saying is when I hover over this, you get the area labels here where it says if I want to flip horizontally, it's going to be Shift plus the F key. Flip vertical is Control Shift F, and so forth. So when I hover over these, it'll give you those keyboard shortcuts. That's a really good point. I'm glad that's why we do this together, Ryan. So you can help me with some of the things I might have missed here. Yeah, thanks for picking me up. So these keyboard shortcuts, are obviously all throughout our product. We've worked very hard to try and make sure not only the math is digital, but accessible for all those students. So a really good point there. Let's see. Let's jump to, and actually, I remember you showing this before, Ryan, but I think it's important to show again. Tip number 4 is how do we copy and paste to a line? And I think I remember you showing this like when you worked in the PDF, how users can have math on one line and then copy and paste that right to the line below and then edit that second line. So if you could show that again, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, great. I mean, think about all these things whenever we're showing them. I'm just used to doing it. I do it every day, and sometimes you forget that you're doing it. It just sort of takes over as like muscle memory. Right. So whenever other people see you doing it, like, hey, how did you do that? And you forget that other people don't know these things. So basically to copy a line then in Equatio, I've got this here very simple equation here. And say, for example, you want to do stepped equations. So you want to move the left-hand side to the right-hand side or vice versa. What we can do is we can use the keyboard shortcut, Control, Shift, and Enter. So it's Control, Shift, and Enter. And that will not only move you down onto the next line, but also take a copy of that first line so that you're free then to manipulate that second line. So we do -5. There we go. Control, Shift, Enter again. And we change the right-hand side to 15. And if you do Control or Shift Enter, rather, Shift Enter takes you down to the new line without the copy. Control Shift Enter is with the copy.
Yeah.
So we go again for 3x 15. And again, here you're seeing the absolute limit of my mathematics skills.
Okay.
And so we got the answer as well.
Yeah, so I can think of like, scenarios where that would come in, really useful for me. Ryan, as a former algebra teacher, I used to really try and emphasize when my students were like isolating a variable and they were bringing math from let's say line 1 down to line 2. I wanted them to show, their logic and their thinking. And I like to have them copy what they had from line 1 into line 2. And then I liked how Ryan was able to just kind of quickly go into line 2 and let's say, subtract 3 from both sides. And you can just throw that quickly in there. There's really not a need for someone to, for example, to jump back in and have to retype the entire line when you have and you're aware of these keyboard shortcuts. So really good stuff there also. So
just while you're on that point as well, Louis, whenever you're saying about, explaining your work and things like that there as well, it's important to know that if you're writing an equation, you can also put a simultaneous equation on the right-hand side of it as well. So if you wanted to explain your working for that line, you can just put a text field in there. So insert text and say, right-hand side.
Yeah, a lot of math teachers love them to kind of explain, well, why did you subtract something from both sides or add something to both sides? So one of the things we did before we improved the palette, let's say back in December, was the ability to add a column in, but now we have an alignment button for that. So we'll kind of get into those alignment things in just a minute, though, so I don't want to spoil that. Let's jump to tip number 5. So how do we copy and paste graphs from Desmos? This is one of my favorite features here. Probably there are many, many Desmos users out there that have been using kind of Equatio and Desmos. Hopefully you're aware that we have, obviously partnered with Desmos. We have the insert graphing tool right here in our toolbar. And one of the really, really cool things I think about Desmos is a lot of folks have their own account for Desmos, right? So notice I have these tabs already queued up so I don't waste time here during our video. But I went into my tab here real quick. I'm at desmos.com. I signed in. So notice I'm signed into my Desmos account. And a lot of Desmos users can access all the graphs that they've saved in the past. So these are all just different examples of things that, I can bring into Desmos and use. Well, so you might be thinking, well, why are we talking so much about Desmos? Because we can take our Desmos, pre-populated graphs and things that we've favorited or saved over in Desmos and bring those easily right over into Equatio. And I'm not going to show this because I live in Central Florida, but I love showing this graph. And the reason why I love showing this graph is not because I'm a fan of Winnie the Pooh, although he's certainly lovable, right? The reason why I love the Winnie the Pooh graph is because there are so many lines here. So if you look at on the left-hand side, there's over 130 items in this Desmos graph that are taken into account in order to form this entire project here. So this is a really, really, really big project here in Desmos. And watch how easy it is to bring this entire graph into Equatio. Now, notice that we go up here. This is our Google Omnibox here, your search engine where people normally go. I'm just going to take my cursor and I'm going to select that URL. And I can do Control-C, or I can right-click on it, hit copy. And now I'm going to go back to my Google Doc. And now this is really, really cool here. I can go to my graph editor in my Google Doc. And I'm simply, now the weird thing here, and keep in mind, I can't right-click here and get to a paste. Okay, but that's okay because we're so familiar with keyboard shortcuts, right? I can still Control-V. And when I paste into line 1, look at that. I mean, that's just incredible. So it literally brought all these lines over from Desmos into my Equatio graph, and I can insert this right into my doc. So take a look at how easy it was to bring this Desmos graph from the Desmos website simply by Control-C, copying this URL, and bringing this over into my graph editor inside of Equatio. So Desmos allows you to take and borrow that URL, paste it inside Equatio, and then insert that graph right into the doc. One other example here, I'm going to skip and jump to another line. let's go back and show you something that is not Winnie the Pooh related, just something simple like a system of linear equations. I'm going to open this graph. We'll show you how to do this one last time. I'm going to hit, I'm going to select this, Control C or copy. I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to make sure my cursor's where I want it. I'm going to go back to insert my graph. And before I do that, let's get rid of everything here. It's a little keyboard shortcut, if you will, here, is I can go and hit that settings gear and delete everything here very quickly. And then Control V. And notice I just copied that Desmos graph right from the Desmos URL and pop it right into the G Suite using Equatio. So really, really great functionality between the two partnerships and the partnership we have with Desmos to allow that to happen. So the ability to take all those graphs that I have from Desmos and bring them into Equatio is really a fantastic feature that we love working with Desmos. They're a great company, and to be able to use their product inside of ours and vice versa is really, really great. So anything to add there, Ryan, that I missed?
No, that was great. I'll just say that my daughter is finally going to take an interest in my work once I show her the Winnie the Pooh graph.
Big fan of Pooh, huh?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, cool. So let's go into the alignment features. And again, I mentioned this earlier. The alignment features are something we added back in like December for Google. So if I go ahead and we'll throw this over to Ryan. Ryan's going to talk about these alignment features real quick for you. So go ahead, Ryan, tip 6.
Thanks, Lou. So whenever we first started Equatio, I don't know if anybody remembers, but the editing features were not what they are today. Let's put it that way. And one of the biggest thing I think that the teachers and students wanted was the ability to align their equations the way that they want. And aligning equations is kind of a difficult thing to do as well, because everybody wants to do it differently. And every equation or every working out is going to be laid out differently as well. So what we've done is we try to provide as many tools as possible to allow users to align the equations as they want them to be done. So if you go into, for example, equations that we have here before from the last question, and if I put my cursor anywhere inside this layout, I can hover over here. I'll get these little buttons on the top of the toolbar. So if my cursor wasn't inside, that Control Shift Enter equation, I wouldn't see those buttons. But whenever I click my cursor inside that equation, those buttons then show up. So that's kind of important to remember that you need to do a new line first before you get the alignment features.
Right.
So once those buttons appear, then we've got different alignments for left, center, and right. So we can do left, obviously it's the standard. We can change that to centrally aligned, and then we can change that to right aligned. And right aligned's great, but the problem is on the second line here, I moved the 5 over to the right-hand side of the equals. So it kind of doesn't look right, I don't think, whenever I'm trying to show my working. So at that point, I think what I would like to do is align that entire working out around the equal sign. So we've got a little button here called the relation align button. And whenever I click on that then aligns everything around the equal sign right down the middle. So as you see, what it does is it breaks that then into the left-hand side of the equal sign and the right-hand side of the equal sign. And the cool thing about that is that now that I have the left-hand side and right-hand side, I can actually align those two sides differently. So this first side is aligned to the, both aligned to the right at the minute, but I can click on the left-hand side and then use those same buttons to align that left, and see the right-hand side goes with it. And then I can click on the right-hand side and align those to the right, and see then they align separately, so they can then adjust, pinpoint exactly which side I want right and which one I want left, and all aligned along the equal sign there as well. And it's important to say as well, I've used the equal sign, but that relational line will work for any relational symbol. So greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, what's important there, and Ryan was, trying to jump into the example is we tried to provide, the alignment features that everyone wants, and the problem is that everyone might want different things. So, when Ryan said, hey, we gave you the align left, and then we give you the align right, and then align by relation. So we tried to hit all those different types of alignment things, but the reality is like Ryan said, everyone kind of has their preference. So we tried to give you as many alignment features as possible there. I think it's like Ryan said. I mean, he jokingly said, "Look, we've vastly improved this from where we first started." So hopefully, you guys are taking advantage of those new alignment features. And the other important thing, and I'll reiterate this, even though Ryan said it, is you really will not see those buttons until you hit that enter key and show that second line. So if you're on the first line and typing, and you're like, "Hey, where are my alignment keys?" They will not appear until you get to that second line, and then make sure your cursor is in that right place that Ryan mentioned. So all really good stuff there. Now let's jump to the next tip. Let's look at add to favorites. So one of the other things we did when we released the alignment features was the add to favorites. So this is an important thing. I think like if you're teaching something like, algebra honors, it could even be third grade math. Think about the different things that you want students to use. So I'm just going to type something very basic in like QUAD into our prediction. I'm going to select the quadratic formula. Now, when I think about this is something that I used to teach, for probably a good 2 weeks at least. So this is something that I may want to teach my students to favorite. If I want them to favorite it, I'm assuming that they're going to be reusing this formula over the course of several days, and I want them to have quick access to it. Now, obviously, you can tell them if you want to use the quadratic formula, just type in QUAD and use the prediction. But we could teach them that we did add these buttons in for your convenience. So when I click on the add to favorites button, I can then name this anything that I want. So I could do something like QUAD, or I can just name this QF. And as soon as I tap this button here, it's going to light up here. And you might go, well, now how do I access it? Where do I get it? So think of the Chrome bookmarks, and all the things that you do and access frequently. We put the favorites over here under the More button. So when you click on these three dots, the favorites will all be listed here. And when I hover over this, you'll see my favorites is listed, and the QF that I just made is favorited. Also, I want you to know that you can favorite really anything. I mean, I don't know when you'd use this type of thing, but like even if you wanted to do 453, plus 236, I mean, this is just a simple number sequence, but I can favorite a number sequence if I want and just call this NS. I don't know how frequently you'd be using that, but if I favorited it, now if I go back to More and go back here, look, it'll favorite even commonly used numbers that you want. If you want to favorite something like, let's think of a matrix that you might use. Let's go back to like a 3-digit subtraction. So if I type in SUBT and I have 3-digit subtraction and I want to access this matrix for third grade students, for example, I can favorite this and call this, SUB, and just simply click on the check. Go back to my favorites, and look, there's the matrix right here. So the add to favorites was a similar function, like you might favorite your favorite banking website or your favorite sports website or your newspaper website. It's a way for you to favorite things within our product so you can have that quick access to them. So last thing I'll show here is when you go here, if let's say you're not going to be teaching the quadratic formula for some time and you want to unfavorite it, simply select this gray heart and it'll take it out of your favorites, your number sequence, and so forth. So that's important. The More button has all sorts of different symbols and features within it. So we encourage you to kind of look at these as you're scrolling to my favorites. If you're a premium user, you should have access to all of these buttons and all of these features. And you can favorite, right from within here. So if you look at your formulas button and you scroll through here and say, we're going to be working with the area of a triangle and I want to favorite it, just simply tap that and it automatically goes right into your favorites. So a really good thing that we added along with those alignment features that Ryan just showed. Ryan, the last one here is the speech input shortcuts, where we talk about, adding of new lines when you're doing the speech input. If you can touch on that.
Yeah, sure. I'll try. So new lines are a little bit difficult to do for speech. So what I'll demonstrate is usually how I use the speech input, and that's not to rely on the speech input for absolutely everything.
Right.
There's some things that are just much better to do in bits and sort of piece together a full equation by using the speech input and then using the equation editor on the right hand side.
Right.
And I definitely think that's where the new line command comes in.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just start reading out an equation. So 3x squared equals 49 plus the square root of 7. Oh. Okay, let me try it again. 3x squared plus 49 equals 7. So you see on the right hand side, then it's taken my speech and it's put it out as one. It's actually put it as two equations there. But let me see. I'll just change that. Take that out, and this is where I find it a lot easier because I can do my new line in here, and then I can go back to my speech on the left hand side, and I can put my cursor in here and say 5 plus 3 equals 8. And you see the way it then puts it on the next line?
Right.
So the reason I say that as well is because then we can manipulate the right-hand side using the equation editor, and you get full access to the alignment features there as well. Right. So if you try to use the speech for doing alignment and trying to do new lines and things like that there as well, it's probably not going to look as well as you would have expected it to look if you do that manual change on the right hand side.
Right. Yeah, and it's fair to say it's for everyone that's listening and using the product, as Ryan indicated, the speech input is designed to listen and hear that math, but if there's any background noise or things, it is supposed to be able to eliminate that. But one of the great things about the speech input is once you're done recording, you can go in and edit that math after the fact. The other really neat thing too, and if Ryan wants to click on it real quick for me, just click over on equation editor for me, Ryan. And watch how when Ryan goes and opens his equation editor, because you're in speech input, go to the equation editor there yep. And notice how Ryan switched into the equation editor, how he made math using speech, and then he can jump over to the equation editor if he wants to, or he can even jump over to the handwriting input method. So students can use this multimodal approach, so to speak, and use different input methods on the different lines that they want to make their math. Well, Ryan and I had no idea that we would actually go the full 30 minutes, and we had some other things on our plate, but it's actually over time. So we appreciate you all kind of tuning in and listening to this episode of Explore Equatio. We appreciate everyone's time and keep the feedback coming. If there's other things you want to see in future episodes, please tweet out to Text Help, or you can reach out to Ryan and I directly on Twitter. So Ryan, we'll let you say goodbye, and we appreciate again for you guys joining us today. We have fun doing this, and look forward to next week's episode. So thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.